You are listening to the 90 Days Later podcast with Anna Charles, episode 191. Welcome to the 90 Days Later podcast, where we talk about what really happens when you take a break from drinking. And it turns out to be the best thing you've ever done. I'm Anna, coach to high achievers who are done waking up with regret and ready to feel in control around alcohol. If you've ever wondered what your life could look like with less wine and more you, you're in the right place. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast. All right, so I am recording this on the day after the Euros 25 final. So this was the football, women's football. So I guess that's soccer for my American friends. And the England team won. Hooray! Huge celebrations. But what is interesting about that team is that they probably should have lost the quarterfinal. They should have lost the semi-final, and they probably should have lost the final. I think in all three matches, maybe they weren't the best team, and you certainly could say they were lucky, but actually they made their luck. In fact, I think it was the semi-final, they scored an equalising goal in the 96th minute out of 97 minutes of play, right? Last minute. And then they actually won the match in extra time on the 119th minute out of 120 minutes to play. And when analysing the match, the coach basically said, yeah, they didn't play great, didn't play very well, especially in the first half. So there we go. I talk a lot about evaluating, so recognising where they didn't play well. But she said, we don't give up. This is a team that wins by any means, right? They won and they kept going when I think probably a lot of people were writing them off. I mean, I know I was watching, I think it was the quarterfinal, and I was packing up and getting ready to go to bed. I thought, there's 10 minutes to go. They're not going to win this. This is finished. And then 2 minutes later, they scored 2 goals. They scored 2 goals in 2 minutes or 3 minutes. So I think there's a huge lesson there that if you are listening to this, and you're thinking, I really haven't ever figured this drinking thing out, and I've tried everything and nothing works, and you just haven't found the right thing yet, right? That's a helpful thought. And I would also offer, if you are somebody who's been listening to the podcast and, you resonate with my material, I will ask you this question directly. Are you taking action? Are you listening and then applying, or are you just listening and consuming? There is a big difference here, right? It is not over till it's over. There is always not just hope, but you can have belief, you can have faith, and you keep showing up and you keep doing the work, you are going to get your result. You just will. I want you to channel the England football team. There we go. All right. So today we're going to be talking about something that messes with a lot of people's heads. This is something I hear. Not so much actually from my clients, because we tend to not get into this because I do a lot of thought work. But this is something I read about a lot on message boards, in some of the forums and so on. And that is, people say, I'm not drinking, so why am I still thinking about it, right? And there is an undercurrent of frustration here. And the way this is presented is kind of like, the people will say, and I've done the hard part, the glass is down. Maybe you're not drinking during the week. Maybe you're skipping the wine at dinner. Maybe you sort of view that you're doing the hard thing, but it's still on your mind, right? You're still thinking about the wine. Maybe you're still thinking about the wine every night. Maybe you're still thinking about the wine when you'd ordinarily be drinking. And you don't like this because you think this has power over you because you're still thinking about it. And why am I still thinking about it? I'm not drinking. What does that mean? What does that mean about me? And so this episode is going to be about that. And it's also going to be about why changing your thinking, I want to offer changing your thinking is really the final frontier. It's a Star Trek reference there. When it comes to freedom. Now, here's the thing. You can stop drinking and you can change your behavior without actually changing your brain, right? So you can stop drinking and you can continue to live in the mental loop of should I, or do I want it, or what if this is the time I cave, or even why am I still thinking about this, right? You can still be having all of those thoughts and you can have changed your behavior. That is not a great place to be, by the way, because in my view, that becomes certainly unsustainable, and it's certainly very hard and feels pressured. But that is possible, right? And here's what most people do then when these thoughts come up. They think, well, if I've stopped drinking, why haven't I stopped wanting it, right? Because they see the action they're taking and they see how they're thinking about it. But I want you to see that this is where there's a mismatch between what's going on in your brain and what's going on with your actions, where your brain is still working essentially off old wiring. And what you've done is you've kind of forced yourself to take different action. It's like we're having thoughts, okay, I'm just going to battle through these and I'm still going to do it anyway. Right? This is where really willpower is running the show, right? Because what we're doing is we have this learned focus to have the focus on alcohol, and it's still running those routines, and you're kind of basically, it's like you're closing your eyes and closing your ears and shutting yourself off from it and saying it doesn't matter, I'm still going to do it anyway, right? This feels really, really hard. And here's the thing, unless you shift that thinking process on purpose, it's going to keep coming up. It will just continue going. So this is what I always say to people. It is not just about putting the glass down, right? That's sort of what we see. That's sort of one of the end results. It's actually only one of the beginning results I create for my clients. But it's not just about putting the glass down. It's about what you make it mean, right? If you stop drinking, largely, let's say you stop drinking during the week. This is very typical when I see when people come to me, but you're continuing to think about it, and you're continuing to think it's the thing you're missing out on, and you're continuing to can't wait till the weekend, and you're continuing to see, oh, it's everybody else is doing this thing and I'm missing out. If you continue to think in that way, your desire is going to continue to be strong. And if you're thinking something as simple as, I really want it, but I really shouldn't, right? Just that word want, that is powerful. And then it builds up and it builds up and it builds up. And we keep bringing ourselves away, and I shouldn't think about it. I mustn't think about it. I mustn't think about it, right? It just gets harder and harder. And the more you think in that way, the more deprived you're going to feel. The more you're going to feel like you are holding your breath. In fact, just talking about this right now on the pod, just saying these words, I can feel my chest tightening and my breath is feeling a bit more shallow, right? Because I'm taking myself there into that way of thinking. You're going to feel like you've lost something, or that you're losing something. Even when your life is actually getting better, even when you've actually created for yourself, maybe you wanted to not drink during the week, maybe you're doing that. But if you're constantly thinking, oh, how am I going to sustain this? Then you are going to be thinking against yourself. This is not about the alcohol, really. This is about the attention you are giving to it. I want you to think about this. Where your attention goes, desire flows. Right? I remember, I'm not really into tennis, but I remember talking to a friend, and she told me that when she was learning to play tennis, she kept serving the ball and she kept hitting the net because she was so nervous she wasn't going to get the ball over the net. Just carried on hitting the net, and her dad told her that she was hitting the net because that's where her eyes were, right? She was so focused on what she didn't want to do, which was to not hit the net. That's where she was putting all of her focus, and her eyes as well. And he said you had to start looking at where you want the ball to go and start thinking about where you want the ball to go, i.e. into the, I don't know what it's called, but the other side of the court, right? And this is what we're talking about here. If we're focusing all our time on I shouldn't be thinking about it, guess what? We're going to be thinking about it. Here's something that is important from the neuroscience side of things. Desire is a learned emotion. It is not automatic. It is not fixed. You can change this after years and years and years of thinking the same thing, right? You didn't come out of the womb craving a glass of Sauvignon Blanc. Your brain learned to associate alcohol with something else, whether it was with a reward, whether it was with connection, whether it was with stress relief, whether it was with celebration, whether it was with solving boredom because you hate feeling bored, right? And it learned that through repetition. You've repeated it again and again and again. It learned that through emotion, that when you feel bored and you have a drink, you don't feel so bored, right? It learned that you feel better then. And it learned it through anticipation. This is when we can get a dopamine high at 3 p.m. We know we're not going to drink at 3. We'd never drink at 3. I mean, that's my clients that never drink at 3, but we can be looking forward to it, right? And that's when we get into, but I shouldn't be thinking about it. Something has gone wrong. That's when it feels really, really tense. And this is why even when the behavior stops, i.e. maybe the drinking stops during the week, the association stays. Unless you change the thought patterns that feed it. I want you to think about that. You are feeding this. You are feeding this by telling yourself, I shouldn't be thinking about this. I shouldn't be wanting this. I shouldn't be doing this. That in itself is feeds. That negative thought is feeding this, how you're feeling. And this is why you can be 5 weeks in. This is why you can be 5 months or even 5 years alcohol free. I read this all the time where people say, I haven't drunk for years, but I really desperately would want to drink if I could just get my hands on a glass of wine. I drink 2 bottles. And this is what's happening, right? You're still feeling the pull, not because alcohol is magical, but because the thought that created the desire was never questioned. And you just carry on letting those thoughts run wild in your mind, or was it rent free? That's the other expression I hear. They're living rent free in your head. Now listen, if you are not intentional with your thinking, actually about anything in life, but very specifically this, if you have been over drinking, it's become a big part of your life. If you're not intentional about changing your thinking around that, you are going to end up reinforcing the same patterns without even realizing it, right? You're going to think things like, because it might not even be what's gone wrong, I shouldn't even be thinking about it. It might be something like, it would be nice. It'd be so nice to have a glass of wine tonight, but I can't. It might be, I'm really trying to be good. It might even be, I want to be good. And that's where we are establishing and assigning some sort of moral, something positively moral about not drinking, right? Which then ironically doesn't make us feel good. These kind of thoughts keep alcohol in the center of the story, right? We're thinking about the evening and what we're going to be missing out on rather than thinking about the evening. And so even when you're not drinking, your brain is still revolving around it, right? I just want you to see that. And this creates another layer of discomfort, because if you're still thinking about alcohol all the time, you probably have an underlying fear that you are going to go back to it. Like you're white knuckling. This is people say to me, what's the difference between craving and white knuckling? This is white knuckling, right? You really are so tense and you're so nervous and you've got all these thoughts and you're really being good and you're trying to be good. You're trying to keep yourself away from drinking. And you're just kind of waiting for that moment where it's all going to fall apart and you're going to slip and that's it. You're going to be back to day one. This is why I don't like day counting, right? When it doesn't feel like who you are, right? It's just you're not relaxed around alcohol, around not drinking. When it doesn't feel like who you are, it's kind of like you've borrowed this dress that you're putting on and it's just not your style. It just doesn't feel good. It just doesn't feel like you. You feel very uncomfortable and you want to change out of it and you want to go back to what feels good, right? And what feels good is not questioning it and just sitting there and having a drink. Now, this fear is valid. I understand this. People tell me I'm really worried. I'm going to go back. But that fear fades when your thinking shifts. Because when you no longer see alcohol as a threat, when you no longer see it as the thing that has the control, it no longer acts as the center of your story. And when that happens, all this anxious energy around it goes. It will dissipate. Because mental freedom is not just about not drinking. It's about not thinking about drinking. In fact, let me change that a little. It's about different kind of thinking around it, right? It's when wine, as I said, isn't the central or main character. It's when you walk into a room and your first thought isn't, oh, is there going to be wine? I mean, I hope there's going to be wine tonight, right? Because this is going to be, can't bear hanging around these people if there's no wine. It's when you finish a long week and your first instinct isn't, I just really deserve a wine for getting through the week, right? It's about your thinking will change. Your thinking will be much more compartmentalized and just much smaller, and it'll be much more intentional. Your thinking around drinking is going to be spending time planning it and figuring out, what is this going to do for me, and do I want to have this or not? And these are decisions that in a very short amount of time can actually be a very quick decision. And then I teach my clients how to follow through on that and how to actually show up and create that behavior. But it starts with this different thinking. Now, people who tell me they don't like the idea of planning, so it takes away the spontaneity and it takes away the fun, I want to offer that is the problem, right? When we're thinking in that way, can you see what you were doing? You were assigning the fun and the spontaneity to the fact that there is going to be alcohol. That alcohol is in charge of that when it never is. And that's one of the thoughts we want to be wiggling free, because that is not serving us. Because here is the deeper part. This is not just about managing a behavior. And by a behavior, I mean having a drink maybe at 6:00. Right? Even if we say that's a habitual behavior, this is about changing your life. You hear those words a lot. I do not say that with any kind of, that is not, as my children would say, that is not me bigging this up. I absolutely 100% believe that this changes your life. This is about stepping into a new identity. This is when you start to direct your thinking on purpose. You don't just react, right, to what shows up. You don't just, even when I'm talking about, you don't just react to your own thoughts. This is about curating your own thoughts and looking for evidence why the new way of doing things is where you want. When your thoughts are really lined up with who you are and who you see yourself and how you see yourself around, the red wine or the white wine, everything really gets easier, right? Because it's just, this is what I do. This becomes a thought that I work on with my clients. This is what I do. I'm not the sort of person that just has a drink at 6:00 because it's a habit. I just don't do that anymore, right? That is very different to saying I really shouldn't have a drink at 6:00 because it's a bad thing to do, right? When you change this at the identity level, you stop needing to convince yourself not to drink. Right? Again, because drinking simply isn't something that you really do anymore unless you plan it intentionally, right? Remember, I believe there is nothing wrong with having a drink. We just want to be super intentional about it. And when you do it in this way, the desire fades too, right? Because there's no longer a mismatch between your identity and your actions. You're not sort of feeling like sitting on the sidelines, missing out. It's like, well, I just don't want that thing. And yes, this does take time. This is not a one and done decision. This is a practice. This is about, you probably heard about treating your desire into mental muscles, like going to the gym. Absolutely, this is it. You just got to do it more and more and more and more. You have to practice being that version of you before it feels automatic. It will feel very clunky to start with. And my perfectionists out there, you need to be willing for this to feel messy. I always say when I start working with people, one of the things you're going to do in this process is you are going to fail. You are going to muck this up. You're going to forget to write a plan. You're going to act it out. You're going to overdrink. You're going to do all the things, right? But I am going to teach you how to forgive yourself so that we can learn and move on, right? So you have to practice. But it starts with this. I mean, it really starts with, if there's one starting point I want to give you here today, you can start with not judging yourself for where you are, wherever that is right now, whether you're drinking daily, just during the week, just a weekend, whatever it is, or maybe you're finding it really hard. Maybe you have that thought, I'm not drinking, why am I still, thinking about it? I don't want you to judge yourself. I don't want you to assume that something's gone wrong just because those thoughts are still there. This is just part of the process. So listen, this is not an episode about going sober. In fact, none of my episodes are about going sober. And this isn't even about, for sure, not about shaming yourself for having desire. I just want you to understand why your brain keeps looping on something that maybe you say logically, I don't even want it anymore. Why am I still thinking this? All right? It's just a reminder that you still have underlying desire there. The desire has just not gone away yet. And maybe that's because you've been willpowering and white knuckling and fighting and resisting and just really trying to be good, right? That does not work for when it comes to changing how much we drink. I have not seen that work, right? We've got to change this at how we feel level. We've got to change this at what we make alcohol mean. You maybe have just not told your brain what to want instead, and you haven't repeated that enough, right? You haven't trained your brain. And this is the part, right, that no one teaches, because this is not about rules. This is not about saying that under no circumstances must you drink after 8 p.m. Right? It's not about that. It's about rewiring. It really is about just learning something new, learning how to do that new thing, and then becoming skilled at that. So if you have stopped drinking, but you still feel mentally stuck, this is your invitation to think about this differently, right? Maybe it means that you are just ready for the next level of change. You do not have to live your life as you are. You do not have to live the life where alcohol is still taking up all that space in your head, right? You do not have to live the life where you're having to manage yourself that whole time and keep yourself good and be kind of on high alert. You can move on from that. You can move to a place where it just does not feel relevant anymore. And this is what I say to my clients. I want to make alcohol an irrelevance. Totally fine if you want to have a drink or not. But it is not the be all and end all. This is the work I do. So if this is what you want, right? If you are having this thought, I'm not drinking, so why am I still thinking about it? And you just want to rewire that, and you want to get to the point where your desire matches the behavior, where you create that different life, talk with me. I am a specialist at this. I talk about this day in, day out. I research it. I read about it. I create materials. This is what I love to do. I do believe I was put on this earth to help people do this, right? People like you listening to this. So if you want to go ahead, if you're ready now, right? Ask yourself, is that the life I want? And why wait? Why wait till even the end of the summer to start? You can start right now, right? Our very first conversation, things will shift for you. I will help you to see the possibility and get into belief. That changes so much about how you see yourself. And so to get time with me, you need to go to 90dayslater.co and click on the book a call button. There will be no hard sell. I do not work with everybody who applies to work with me. It has to be a good fit. So what have you got to lose? All right, that's what I offer for you today, and I will see you next week. If this episode hit home and you're ready to explore what life could look like with alcohol in the back seat, let's talk. I work with people one-on-one who are ready to create the relationship with alcohol that works for them, so they feel powerful in their choices and at peace with their habits. Go to 90dayslater.co and click on book a call, or grab one of the free guides in the show notes to this episode. And if this podcast is helping you, a rating or review goes a long way to help others find this work too.